This is Secrets to Win Big, your roadmap to sustained growth. Brought to you by Arjun Sen, founder and CEO of Zen Mango, top brand growth driver, and a former Fortune 500 executive who has been called one of the most marketing intelligent minds in the business. Find him at zenmango.com. And now, here's your host, Arjun Sen.
Welcome to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen. Hi, this is Arjun. Winning is fun, but I have found that winning big puts us on the path to sustained long-term wins. Now that, to me, is real fun. To start the podcast, I really want to share about my advantage, which is I have the best seat in the house in all these fascinating conversations with leaders from all walks of life all around the world. And the reason it's important is none of our journeys are the same. Our starting points are different, destinations are different, paths we are comfortable are different. And that's the reason these unique conversations are like gold mines for me personally and for all of us. In that spirit, today, it's my pleasure to welcome my VIP guest, Charles E. Gaudet. Charles is a super success business owner. And that super success is what we'll get into because a lot of people are successful. But I call super success is when you make others obscenely successful. An author and an expert is entrepreneurism. He's the founder of CEO of Predictable Profits, a leading coaching and consulting company for 7 to 8 figure entrepreneurs who seek better sales and revenue systems for more predictability, profitability, and scalability in any economy. Charles is the author of Predictable Profits Playbook, the entrepreneur's guide to dominating any market and staying on top. He's also the host of the Beyond Seven Figure podcast, which is one of the coolest podcasts I've been fortunate to be invited to be a guest on. Charles, welcome to Secrets to Win Big.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So first of all, this is a question all weekend I wanted to ask you. You have been an entrepreneur since the age of 4. F-O-U-R, 4. Okay. I have no clue what I was doing at 4. Okay. And then at 24, you started your first multi-million-dollar business. Can you tell us some stories about your growing up years, your journey as an entrepreneur, and how the heck did you start at 4, my friend?
So there's a saying that people make decisions for 2 reasons. It's either out of inspiration or desperation. Mm-hmm. Well, for me, I guess you could say it was a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. My dad was an entrepreneur, and my dad followed the traditional entrepreneurial path where he believed that the secret to success was working hard. Mm-hmm. So he would get up in the morning before I would get out of bed, and he'd go to work, and he would come home only after I went to bed, and he did that 7 days a week. So up until about the age of being in 3rd grade, I didn't really get a chance to know my dad. But when I did see him, he would tell me one of 2 things. He would either say, hey, kid, if you ever want to make something yourself, you got to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Or he would say, kid, and this is when he was having a bad day, kid, employees suck. Don't ever be an employee. Now, I don't agree with this second phrase because, quite frankly, I could never be where I am today if it wasn't for the benefit of my team around me. It's one of the biggest, strongest assets I have. But when it came to I think a lot of kids want to get their father's approval and their attention and whatnot. And for me, because my dad continued to reinforce this idea of wanting to be an entrepreneur, that was ultimately the key to success, I decided at 4 years old, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And I didn't know what to do. So I just started drawing on construction paper, going to my neighbors' houses and selling construction paper for, at the time, I think it was 25 cents a piece. But Arjun, I have to tell you though, and I don't tell too many people this, but that was one of both the best and most painful experiences of my life. Mm-hmm. And I say that because as a little kid, when you go around to different people's homes and all you're doing is you're asking for 25 cents or so, most people, they don't think twice about 25 cents. They'll go in their pocket. They're happy to support a young entrepreneur and hand over a quarter for artwork. That worked well up until the last house I visited that day. Her name was Mrs. Hersey. And I went knocking on her door and I said, I'm selling some artwork for 25 cents a piece. Would you like to buy some? And she said, sure. Could you show me? And so I pulled out my artwork. I laid it all out. And she stood back and she looked at me and she says, Charlie, is that the best work you could do?
Wow.
And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, to me, that looks like scribbles. It doesn't look like you put much care into that at all. And for that reason, I'm only going to give you 3 cents.
Wow.
And I was painfully embarrassed because I knew that she was right. I didn't put my best foot forward. All I did was follow the traditional means and guidelines that I later learned was a premise behind many corporations and still is, which is that the whole purpose behind a business was to increase shareholder value. And that's what I thought back then, that the whole purpose of me running a business was to put money in my pocket.
That's not the purpose. And what I love is at the age of 4, not only did you create a product, you had the experience of going door to door and putting yourself in front of rejection.
It's true.
But the biggest thing was that lesson that you are not putting the best foot forward. But what I also love about the story, Charles, is that the moment she said, you didn't argue. A 4-year-old would have argued, any other 4-year-old, okay, or cried. You realized that you were not putting your best effort, and that became the lesson. Because I really think that the 22 cents less that she gave you, she compensated way more in wisdom for the rest of your life. And I feel that that is so important because most of us know when we are not putting our best effort, and we still do it just to make money. So let's talk about the business at 24 years old. So what was that company? Tell us a little more about the 24-year-old. What was he doing?
So I had just concluded another business. And as I finished that other business, I said to my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, what are we going to do next? And my dad was in real estate development, or rather he was in construction. That's what he did for a living. And I said to her, I go, I'm always a big fan of playing cards with the best hand that you've been dealt. And so if we look at my parents, both my parents are very successful in their own right. I said, why don't we leverage some of the experience that they have? And I'm going to start a real estate development business. Now, when I told my dad, hey, Dad, guess what? I'm going to start a real estate development business. His first response was, I told you to go to college so you didn't have to get into this business. Because he just felt that it was a very difficult business to get into. It could be very cutthroat and so forth. And, he had these dreams and aspirations that, maybe I would have taken a different path. But I convinced him that, I'm very headstrong. I didn't have to convince him. I told him that there was no other option. I decided I was going to do this and I wanted him to mentor me. What ended up happening, of course, is when I started the business, almost instantly I put myself in over $1 million worth of debt. It was so stressful. To my dad's point, I now understand why he said what he did. It was so stressful. The stress itself put my dad right on his back. It would cause him so much pain thinking about how much stress that I was under. He was on his back, couldn't get out of bed. And before long, I ended up in the emergency room for stress that eventually was shutting down my organs. And the doctors told me that it was killing me. And a lot of my stress, in addition to being in over $1 million in debt with paying double-digit interest rates, was that I fell into my dad's footsteps, and I believed that the only way to succeed was hard work. And so I would set my alarm for 3:30 in the morning so that I wouldn't, quote unquote, oversleep. I would work all day until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Weekends, holidays, it didn't matter. I worked Christmas the same way, it didn't really matter. But all of that caught up with me. And it wasn't until that event that I realized that if it wasn't going to be hard work, that when I could look around me and I could see that I outworked everybody, but that there were people out there that were working half as much as I did, making 10 times more, that they had to know something that I didn't. And then I made the decision that something had to change. And that was 1 year later that I not only paid back all my debt, but I created my first multi-million-dollar business.
Wow. So if you were to go back and do that start the same business again, and you were back again 24 years old, what would you do differently this time?
Great question. I tried to control and do everything myself. Everything from I was sweeping out the houses, to designing the homes, to managing all the subcontractors, you name it. I tried to do everything. Because remember what I told you about when I was 4, I had this idea that, having a team was a negative. And it wasn't until later that I grew to a point where having a team became necessary that I realized, wait a minute, having a team, when managed correctly and when hired the right way, can become your strongest and best asset. Because there's a formula for achieving your goal. That is actions plus resources equal goal. Now, I actually believe the formula is slightly different in that it's actions times resources equal goal. So it's a multiplication factor, not an addition factor. But back in my early 20s, everything I did was all action and very little resource.
You were the only resource.
I was the only resource.
So action times 1 kept you not at the $1 million of revenue that you were getting to. And 2 micro stories come to my mind. One is I was talking to this incredibly proud entrepreneur who was telling me that for his retail business, he has this amazing skill to design and approve every billboard the company does. So I asked him a very simple question, how long does it take? And then I did the math by saying, if I gave you 8 hours for sleep and 2 for bio needs and 1 hour for family, you would not grow beyond 108 restaurants or retail units. Okay, because physically, we both cannot go beyond the 24 hours. Okay. And sometimes we just feel that it's cool to do that. And in another case, there was this super amazing friend of mine, CMO, who got promoted to CEO. And he thought to save budget, he will hire the other CXOs and he'll still keep doing the marketing himself. And that nearly cost him his job because the board of directors realized that they have a good CMO who was not performing fully as CEO because his passion was still marketing. And in the nick of time, he hired a CMO to free himself. Otherwise, I feel that he would have been in an embarrassing situation where they would have told him and given him more money and everything by saying, be the best CMO you can be. But I really think that this is such a huge challenge for all of us as we grow. We focus more on action instead of what you talked about, the multiplication of resources, because good resources amplify. So, from there, I just want to get to another unique part of your life. And these are all fascinating. Like over the weekend, I was talking to my wife and told her, this is a very fascinating human being I'm talking about. And she asked me are you guys even going to talk work? I'm like, maybe, who knows? So I want to talk about your training in jiu-jitsu. Okay. And the very fact you talk about it, that tells me that there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of commitment. Okay.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit how you got into martial arts and how that defines Charles, the human being, and makes him successful in the business side.
What an excellent question. So it actually starts when I was in high school. I decided that I wanted to be a wrestler, a high school wrestler. What I didn't know when I set foot on the mat is that many people who set out to be the best started training when they were much younger, when they were 4 or 5, 6 years old. I didn't even know those programs were available. But then my freshman year, I made the decision that I wanted to be the best. And from that, I made sure that I met with the best coaches. So my coach was good, was really good, excellent, in fact, but that I also wanted to make sure that I met with the best coaches possible. So even while in high school, I went to go train with the wrestling team at the University of Lowell, at Boston University, at all these colleges, even though I'm in high school, and they let me train. Then I went out and for 2 years in a row met Dan Gable. Dan Gable is the only Olympian in wrestling history to ever win the gold medal without having a single point scored against him.
Wow. Not a single point scored against him.
Not a single point scored against him.
Wow.
And so I carried that mentality throughout the entire 4 years of high school. I wrestled all year round. When everybody else took the season off, I found other people and other competitions that I could wrestle. And then by my senior year, I was undefeated, won the Massachusetts Greco-Roman State Championship, Massachusetts Freestyle State Championship, and then the high school state championships as well. Then into college, I focused more on my sports, but did a little boxing on the side. But then afterwards, I missed that ability to just wrestle. And there's a different mindset. Mm-hmm. In business. I was afraid that I was focusing on one thing, that I needed to, be able to balance myself out by studying different things instead of being so unilaterally focused. So I needed to take something else on. So I went to jiu-jitsu, and I started training with a gentleman that at the time was ranked number 4 in the world for his weight class. And the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is that if I win a match, unlike, say, a soccer team or a football team or whatever, it's easy to say, I played good, but they missed the goal, or they didn't do whatever. When you're on the mat and you're fighting somebody in jiu-jitsu, you get exactly what you put into it. Mm-hmm. If you win, that's all on you. If you lose, that's all on you. And the other beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is that when I set foot on that mat, I am learning the exact same technique, the exact same skill as a black belt who's been training for 2 decades. But the difference can only actually be seen to the naked eye, or it's hard to be seen by the naked eye, because the difference between winning and losing could be the difference between somebody who has their thumb down and somebody who has their thumb up. Their thumb up will allow their elbows to stay closer to their side and harder to be pulled away from the body, versus a thumb down. The elbow actually is a little bit more further removed from the body, and it makes their arm much more vulnerable. But the same thing happens in business. How many times, you're an extraordinarily brilliant man. You can walk into a business and you can see things that a CEO has been looking at for years. And it's been a problem that he's been trying to solve for years. You can walk in and within 30 seconds be able to say, this is the problem, this is why you're experiencing it. It's the same thing with jiu-jitsu, the difference between the thumb up and the thumb down. It takes 20 years of experience for somebody to really be able to see that. And that's why people hire you for all your expertise, because you've been so dedicated for so many years that you can walk in and immediately say, that's the difference.
So there are 3 things that come to my mind. One is the importance of the best of coaches. Okay, a few years back, I was working with one of the top golfers on this planet. And all of a sudden I realized from the age of 5, this man has been working with the best coaches and putting in 14 to 15 hours a day, maintain and enhance skills. I put myself next to that person's accomplishments and realized twice a year I go to 2 conferences, meet a few people, have a glass of wine, and I think that is investing in myself. Okay, I came back embarrassed, and I just was thankful that I have already survived in the business world all these years, because to be the best, you cannot look at what you did yesterday. You constantly have to invest. Okay, and that's the part where having somebody like you on the side, I really think makes it incredible, because with your vision and how you can impact, literally you are the multiplier in that journey. The second thing I loved the fact was the micro difference between winning and losing. And first thing is, what you said was brilliant there, was it takes years of practice to notice it. Okay, I would take a step beyond. I think it takes years to notice, but it takes years more for it to be your natural instinct, because knowing alone doesn't work. Okay, when you are on the mat, you cannot think and do things. It has to be automatic reflex to do what it takes to win. And at the end, it's all you. And finally, I think, that last part really resonated with me, is seeing beyond, because most people don't pause to see that one thing others cannot. Okay? The reason, anywhere you go in the world, nearly everybody who reads detective books or watches movies knows Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Like you and I could be detectives. We could follow the 42 step process. We did everything. And I would report to you by saying, boss, I looked at the 42-step process. Sherlock Holmes would come in, lift the table, and find that micro hair under the table. Okay. Like something that was there. And every time he found something different. Okay. And I really love that last part of the description that you talked about is sometimes CEOs do not see from that outside point of view. We get fatigued and we keep seeing the same thing every day, every time. And that's the part where one of the things I really love and push folks who I work with is not only notice change, but make change. Make some changes in your office every week and see if people notice it. Okay? Because remember, when we were kids, we used to have these puzzles, which used to be the two pictures and what are the 6 things different in these pictures and how fast. Because somehow I really think that that was such an amazing training tool for me because that helped me notice change. And I really love each of these 3 things that you talked about, the importance of coaches, especially not any coach, the best of coaches. The second, as you talked about, is knowing the difference between winning and losing is micro. And third is seeing beyond. So I want to go to some of your awards and recognitions. Okay? Like I can't think of an award or recognition you haven't got. Ernst Young, usually, these guys do not talk about others, but they called you one of the best seed stage companies. Okay. You got recognition for the US Army College. You got, business advice featured around the world. International Business Time calls you the go-to business coach. Like, wow, this is all intense stuff. But every conversation I had with you, you are so grounded. What keeps you so grounded? Because a consultant with your level of skills very easily can be little arrogant or a lot arrogant. Okay. And then it's a pain to work with those people.
Sure.
The fun to work with Charles is not only he's brilliant, but it's fun to work with because of your humility. So what's the secret to stay grounded with all these super recognitions?
I think the recognitions come with a double-edged sword, or experience comes with a double-edged sword. And that is the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Mm-hmm. And while I do appreciate all the recognitions and whatnot, I also recognize how many more questions I have that I'm looking for answers for. And so, I guess that what keeps me going is just an insatiable sense of curiosity. And I guess to answer your question is just what keeps me grounded is realizing how much I don't know. If you had talked to me, 10, 20 years ago, I would have told you I knew everything. I would have been very egotistical, but I figured everything out then.
Yeah.
But now I've only realized I feel I'm just scratching the surface.
I really see that could be the headline of an upcoming book by Charles is never run out of questions you're looking answers for. Okay. I really feel that is so powerful. What you said is the moment we get there, because I feel that the biggest certainty in our lives is the uncertainty of tomorrow. The problem that will come tomorrow is usually not something you have studied. It's not like a test in an exam where you study and you answer. And that curiosity, I love that. So let me go a little bit into work, because when my wife listens to the conversation, I really tell her that we had a work conversation. So to me, I just want to understand a little bit about your leadership style. You talked about so much of respect for your team. What makes you good in managing your team and making your team that resource that you talked about, not additive, but a multiplier?
So the motto in our company is that together we are better. Mm-hmm. And we talk about that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. We rise as a team, and collectively we fall as a team. And so it's in our best interest to bring out the best in all of us. Mm-hmm. And so part of our leadership, and this can go way deep down a rabbit hole, so I'll try to keep it at a higher level, is understanding each individual's unconscious motivations. And as we understand how each individual is motivated, as a leader, I can then lead the way they need to be led to bring out their best self. A mistake most commonly made by leaders is that they lead people in the way that they feel motivates themselves. Yet the byproduct of that often is dysfunction, a lack of productivity, demotivation, and so forth. So the motto of Together We're Better also means that we have to bring out, it's a very selfless way of leadership, because if you and I are on the same team, Arjun, then I have to bring out your best self.
Mm-hmm.
To bring out your best self ultimately helps support me and the company and everything else. And that's, I mean, just this morning, one of our new hires sends me a message and she writes, "You're right, Charlie. Together we're better. Actually, scratch that. Together we're the best." And it just, when you can make work the best place, the best time period of their day, I feel like you've created a victory. And we have team members, just to give you the idea of the strength behind this concept. I want your listeners to ask themselves, how often would it happen, or would you ever be surprised to learn that a team member dipped into their own pockets to pay for something that supports your company without actually coming to you for the expense? And I remember hearing the story a long time ago that Fred Smith, when he started FedEx, there was a time period where FedEx was struggling a little bit, and his drivers believed so much in Fred that the drivers would go to the gas station and fill up the trucks using their own credit card. And I'm like, my gosh, what kind of culture do you have to be? What kind of leader do you have to be in order to do that? Now, fast forward a number of years, where I'm in a more fortunate, different situation than Fred Smith, and that our company is doing well. But I just found out yesterday, one of my employees wants T-shirts for everybody. And he sent me a T-shirt design that he's working on. And he says, "Hey, can we use this T-shirt?" And I'm like, "Oh man, that would actually be fantastic. I'd love that. Just tell me how it is, or send me the link and I'll buy it." And he goes, "No, I want to buy this for everybody in the company."
Wow.
So he's dipping in. He wants to do it using his money and his credit card to share with the team. I could tell you that that's the only time that it's happened, but it wouldn't be true. This has happened over and over and over again, where somebody would buy a software and they want to try it before they'd ask me to reimburse them for the software. That's, I guess, when we talk about Together We're Better, that's, I guess, the kind of output that we get from the team itself.
I was this close to interrupting you when you first talked about Together We Are Better. And you mentioned that you talk about it a lot because, in the corporate world, you and I both see so many times companies have this amazing saying.
Yeah.
And they talk, but they don't live it. Okay. I haven't seen a single company who would say, "Together we are not better." Okay. But what I realized was the proof that you are living it happens when you actually live this and believe. And togetherness or a partnership or feeling ownership comes in when you start the process, but team members reciprocate.
You're right.
If I was working for you, I'm just trying to visualize how much do I have to feel ownership in the company that is created by Charlie for me to take my credit card out during these tough times to make a purchase. Okay. So I really feel that this is such an incredible moment of proof of what you're living, because, it's just like businesses say we are family. Family is you act like family, but the client or the team member acts back as family. You getting that action back is priceless. Like, to me, if I at the end hope and wish for one thing for your amazing journey, is this: more and more of your team invest back, because that is the proof that what you're building is amazing. Because once you have a team like this is simply fascinating. I just have a question. You talked briefly about clients. Each one of us, yes, we all want to make money and more money and everything else. But at the end, it is those client moments. When a client just has that glitter on their eyes, it's just like if this was a personal life, it's like an amazing date. They look at you and say, "Wow, you didn't have to do that. You just surpassed your expectation." Are there any stories, Charlie, that jumps out, which is, again, I don't want to get into any confidential information, but anything that you can share that would really make you smile as you shared that amazing story?
When you say story, help me understand
Any
it.
accomplishment when a client looked at you and said, wow, you guys went above and beyond. You didn't have to do that. Like a moment like this when it hits the client hard.
I mean, there's been a couple moments where I've literally had clients, strong male figures, that have cried in front of me because their companies, we achieved a certain degree of success that was well beyond what they thought was possible. You know, they've been fighting and struggling for years and years and years, unable to break through a certain ceiling, feeling burnt out. And then all of a sudden there's some form of release that, you know, that they cried. And that, of course, has been, you know, definitely an emotional moment. I cherish all my relationships. My son and my daughters come into the office and they're often asking me about my clients and my work and whatnot. And they joke around and they go, Dad, you don't even work all day. And I'm like, you're right. I am in a unique position and then I get to talk to my friends all day. And that's the way that I feel. And they say that because we're laughing, we're joking. They're texting me pictures of their children. They're sending gifts. You know, I always cross the line. You know, they say business is business, but we always make business personal. There is one story, though, in particular that really stands out because it is something most recent. And that is when 2000 hit, I get this phone call. Gentleman's hair is all disheveled. And he says to me, just tell me, am I out of business? I says, what do you mean? He says, just tell me, am I out of business? I mean, because right now, I mean, my business has all of a sudden just come to a screeching halt. The world is shut down. Am I out of business? And I said, no. In fact, quite the opposite. He said, what do you mean? I said, right now is the best time in the world for you to be in business. He said, wait, I don't understand. I said, people often think that they're more strategic than they are in a good economy because anybody can grow their business in a good economy. But in a bad economy, that's where rubber hits the road. Your competition is going to start pulling back. They're going to be pulling back. They're going to be scaling back their advertising, laying off their team and whatnot. This is an opportunity for you to strategically lean in and adapt. And if you can adapt and play your cards correctly, you're going to capture more market share than you would now than previously in good times. The result of us leaning in the way that we did not only grew his company, it made him the most successful company in the world within his particular niche. And he has offices all around the world, so this was even more impactful. But in December of 2020, his sales were 400% greater when the world was shut down than in December of 2019.
Wow. 400% higher than a year.
The same period in December, not for the year, but the same period in December.
Yeah, same period. Discounting for, like, to me, if COVID made it stronger, like he rediscovered. So I have a question as I was listening to you. Of course, this amazing person, he knows his business so well. How do you see what he was not seeing?
Well, it's kind of like jiu-jitsu, right? I've been doing this long enough and experienced so many different things that the most obvious things that I can see maybe aren't the most obvious things to somebody else who's in the trenches all day. Same thing, Arjun, though. But if we were to flip the tables, I'm in the trenches of my business all day. I don't pretend to know anything. If we flipped the tables around and you were to coach me, you could probably sit here and spend weeks on all the opportunities that I've overlooked. For him, one of the things that I've learned, having gone through the 2008 housing crisis, was an understanding that for us to survive as a business, when we hit an inflection point, we're faced with 4 decisions. Number 1, you either change the market to meet the message. Number 2, you change the message to meet the market. Number 3, you change both the message and the market. Or number 4, you sit back, cross your fingers, and you hope things will change. Most entrepreneurs at that time were focused on number 4, which is just, let's sit back and hope things will change. The ones that survived adapted quickly. And so for us, looking at the company, it was, okay, let's take a look at where we need to adapt. And we noticed that people were still opening his emails. People were still clicking on the links, but they weren't buying, which meant that the market was there. The demand was there, but the message needed to change. And the moment we changed the message, sales started coming in. And not just coming in, they were like flooding in. And so, that's...
I love that. It's kind of brilliant. So this year, or late last year, as we all realized that we cannot deny the impact of COVID, one of the things I started pushing folks, any client of mine, because remember last year was an Olympic year. So that got pushed to this year. I asked if any sports, for you, it's martial arts. How would you play if you knew there's no silver medal, there's no bronze? Winner takes the gold and everybody else leaves with nothing. And, to me, every time I asked the question, it changed people's mindset, because we all feel that in any business, there's a second position, third position that pays, there's enough reward for that. But if you start looking at how the world is changing, from Google to Facebook to Microsoft to Apple, the brands that would be there in the next 10 years have to go and put their name on the biggest billboard as the dominating number one player with nearly no distant second. Like you and I can walk on any street once, of course, COVID is gone, and ask people who is number two to Google. I don't think people can say that. Okay? Who's number two to Facebook? Like there's no answer for some of these. And that's the part where what I really love is difficult times means it is the time to consolidate and totally dominate and own.
But
so I want to go to...
If I may chime in for 1 minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
You bring up a really good point. When you ask the question, what if there was no gold or bronze?
No, silver or bronze, only gold.
Silver or bronze, right. So my prediction is that if there was only a gold, the moment somebody felt that they weren't going to win, they were going to give up. And, in my family, we have a lot of like these different weight loss competitions, right? My brothers, my folks, my friends and whatnot. And I realized that the moment somebody thought that they were going to lose, everybody else lost their motivation.
Wow.
So I added one change. The next time somebody asked me, do you want to be a part weight loss competition? I said, yes. And I said, but with one caveat. And they go, what's that? I go, whoever loses the competition has to pay double.
I love that.
And so what ended up happening was that throughout the entire competition, do you think people were more motivated to win or more motivated not to place last?
Not to play, yeah.
Not to place last. And so, there's a saying that's people do more to avoid consequence than they do to gain pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But now as a leader and a CEO, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what is going to be enough to motivate me to get to that next level? And sometimes we can fall into this trap of being comfortable because we don't have bosses. We may have to, answer to our spouses, but we have a certain amount of flexibility. So when I realize that something is really important for me to do, I may say to one of my team members, here's my deadline. If I don't do it, then I will donate X amount of dollars to a charity of your choice, or I will give you X amount of dollars or whatever that might be. Not that I have anything against giving to charity or whatnot, but I want to do it on my terms, not in terms of a penalty.
Totally.
And so that tends to be a motivating factor. And so for businesses, I feel like there always needs to be this drive to be number one. And if you're not going to beat Microsoft, then find a niche for yourself where you can be number one. And really just strive to do that, because the penalty of not being number one is that you will be forgotten and eventually you will.
And I love the second part of what you said was, if you can't be number one, find your niche. In India, I come from India, and the favorite sports is cricket. Okay. Only difference is that before you pitch, you keep running and then you throw the ball and it's overarm action. The year was 2003. On a flight, I met one of India's premium bowlers. And this guy was at the end of his career, and we talked, and he was like, Arjun, there are faster people, better, blah, blah, blah. And the World Cup cricket was coming up, which is like billions of people watch it, especially when India plays Pakistan. So on an 8-hour flight, I couldn't get through to him. So finally, I told him, hey, this is what I'll do. I'll write something on a napkin for you. When you go home, open it. And if you follow it, you owe me a phone call. That's it. It's a fair trade. India had an amazing World Cup. We had a great tournament. We just had one bad match on the final day. On the finals, we lost, but, something to be very proud of. This guy called me back and he said, Arjun, you changed my life. So what I'd written for him was, as he walks back to take a U-turn to start accelerating to deliver the ball, my message to him was, you are the world's fastest vegetarian bowler. And he said, Arjun, you have no clue. Every time I would turn, I had a smile on my face. Okay. Initially, I used to think you were silly, but then I realized that I am one of one. Doesn't matter whether it's vegetarian, but the world's number one vegetarian bowler is ready to bowl now. And he said, it put me in a position of power where I saw how good I am, and that helped me be the best I could be. And, when you talked about that, I really feel that that is such a powerful thing, is find that one place that one hill that you can be one of one, then make it bigger. But start by the one of one, which is unique and huge.
I love that.
So Charlie, this is a fascinating conversation. You and I, when we talk, we know we can go for hours. Like, this is huge. So I just want to, somewhat wrap this by bringing back and bringing to the close and ask you, what do you want listeners to know about your business, your company, something that they do not know already? And again, I'm just going to start by saying Charlie is rock solid cool and cool with an impact every time. So it's all yours.
Oh my gosh. So something that they don't know about my company. Something that I want people to know that they don't already know about the company. That is, here's, I guess, something kind of interesting, I guess. A lot of people, when they come to us, they hear stories about how quickly we've been able to grow companies. Mm-hmm. We took a company that was, doing low six figures, took them to 4-point-something million within a year. Took a company from $1 million to 24.6 within 3 years. I mean, we've oftentimes created campaigns that generated well over $1 million, more money than the company saw 12 months combined, and did it in 10 days. So people tend to think that we've got this sort of the skill or ability for rapid growth, and that is the ultimate objective. But the reality is it's not. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that focusing on growth and growth alone is actually a very dangerous proposition. And the reason for that is a lot of times people have these dreams for getting on like the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list. And we've taken many companies to that list. Well, the Kauffman Foundation did a study, and they found that 66% of companies that made it to the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list within 5 to 8 years were disadvantageously sold, went out of business, or shrunk in size. And the reason why that is the entrepreneurs are so focused in on doubling their growth and whatnot. Well, and first of all, the business grew faster than their abilities to lead. But second of all, the one thing that's not sexy that few people talk about is sustainable growth.
Love that.
And that's what really it's all about. Is it's not how quickly can I grow. It's about what needs to happen in order to create sustainable growth month after month after month. And because so many different businesses have so many different overlooked opportunities, mm-hmm. that spike in that rapid growth is just a matter of lighting. You've got all the fuel that you need around your business. It's just lighting the spark that catches the fuel on fire. But then how do you keep that going? And it's that sustainability, that we focus on.
I love that wisdom on sustainability, because as I'm listening to you, I feel without the plan to sustain, rapid growth could be a deterrent for long-term success. If I cannot survive growing fast, I could burn my relationships, my clients, and once your reputation is gone, and I love that focus on sustainability. Here's my last question to you, and I've really worked hard on this question. Okay.
Uh-oh.
A 4-year-old, maybe the youngest ever successful traveling salesperson who did not stop at the first rejection at the end of the neighborhood. A 24-year-old who learned the hard lesson of life by nearly having long-term health challenges by focusing only on action but not on resources. Now you're immensely successful, very happy for you and very proud. Where will Charlie be in 2025, 2030 and beyond?
Ooh, that is a great question. I'll tell you where my vision is ultimately. First, I'll answer the first thought in my mind, but then I'll tell you what I've been strategically building for.
Mm-hmm.
The first thought on my mind is that whatever it is that I'm doing, I still want to make sure that I'm living every day is getting better and better with my family and, my kids, and my relationship is so great that, 2025, 2030, I just picture me having, doing more stuff with the kids and, bigger adventures and all that other stuff. But, the reality is, what I'm building for, Richard Branson is my professional role model. And so much so that I named my oldest child Branson after Sir Richard Branson. What I liked about Richard Branson is that anytime you see his image or whatnot, he's having a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And he's enjoying life. He's also the person who's going to say, look, the only reason why I'm as successful as I am is not because I'm, the most intelligent person, but maybe I'm just dumb enough to keep standing up after getting knocked down. And he continues to go after it and after it and after it. Branson has built this empire where he owns hundreds of different businesses. And he is the visionary, or you could otherwise say the coach, for all the enterprises that he owns. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the way that I've seen the longer term picture of the company is that we would eventually begin building that portfolio. So we're building that portfolio for one. For other things, when people look at predictable profits and people want to know and define predictable profits, I'd like to be known as creating a company that is otherwise referred to as the McKinsey of small business, where we've been able to have a massive, quantifiable, substantial impact in our small business community.
I love that. Absolutely. The common thread of this incredible discussion and conversation has been two things. One, you take every relationship seriously, whether it is with team members, whether it is with clients, whether it is with family, not in that order. And, to me, that just fascinated me that no relationship is disposable. Okay. Many a time we look at relationships, use it, make some money or anything like that. I love that. The second part, I really hit home by never run out of questions. You're looking for answers because we really do not know what we do not know. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when you talked about, Richard Branson and standing up, it just reminds me of a great story my grandma used to tell me, and no podcast is ever complete without talking about my amazing grandma. She talked about if 5 people are standing and there's a lot of pressure, situations are tough, all you have to do is stand your ground. If others take a step back, you automatically is perceived to be the leader of the pack because you do not lose any ground. And to me, I really love that whole concept of standing up. Like all you have to do is stand up where nobody else would dare. So Charlie, this has been a fascinating conversation. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking not only time, but also sharing so spontaneously and authentically. Amazing conversation. Thank you again, my friend. Thank you.
This has been my honor. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you all. And again, I enjoy having the best seat in the house to listen and have these fascinating conversations. Happy listening. And very soon in another episodes of Secrets to Win Big, would be excited to bring you another conversation with another thought leader from another part of the world. But, I have to confess, this one could be tough to beat. I'll try. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Secrets to Win Big with Arjun Sen, founder and CEO of Zen Mango, top brand growth driver, and a former Fortune 500 executive who has been called one of the most marketing intelligent minds in the business. To learn more, visit www.zenmango.com. Share this podcast with your friends and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.